Hello friends and neighbors. Okay, we are back. I just had to plug in my phone because it was dying. Apparently I forgot to plug it in and charge it last night, so whoops. Okay, so we are continuing on with this Rolling Stone article and all the reasons why I kind of hate Peter Bogdanovich. What fun. Okay. Peter Bogdanovich's source for his allegation that Hefner raped Stratten was Patrick Curtis, who, according to the director, befriended Stratten on her arrival at the mansion and quickly became her confidant. Curtis was a friend of Hefner's who had hung out at the publisher's house for years. He was told he was unwelcome when Mary O'Connor, Hefner's secretary of 16 years, charged that Curtis was bilking her boss on the restoration of an antique car. I love Mary O'Connor. O'Connor, a tall woman of 57 who smokes her cigarettes down to the filter, swears like a man, and remains fiercely protective of Hefner, usually gets the task of expelling friends on the gang list, a group of about 20 who have 24-hour privileges at the Hefner estate. Sometimes it's nice, she says when Curtis's name is mentioned. Hefner assumes Curtis, who has been described as a charming sociopath, fabricated the story he told Bogdanovich out of anger at his banishment from the country club. Yeah, that's that same stupid guy who showed up on Secrets of Playboy making up bullshit the whole time. I don't believe him. I don't believe one word out of his mouth. That guy, a lot of people on there, I do believe him. Him, 0% do I believe him. In Unicorn, Bogdanovich implies that his motivation for passing his days and nights at Hefner's house was to gain better understanding of what he felt was the vulgar underside of mansion life. The message: he's more behavioral psychologist than horny guy. Rather quickly, however, the boys' camp atmosphere began to bore me, he wrote. There was more beneath the surface, I knew. But to discover the layers meant joining in the sexuality, and group sex held special repugnance for me. Once I was tricked into a compromising situation at the mansion in the jacuzzi by a Hefner buddy using a young woman as bait. The incident sickened and estranged me further. I had also come to realize that the men of Playboy pursued women only for sex and rarely even had conversations with them. Hefner's staff women, although hardly objective sources, remember Bogdanovich in a different light. Their contempt, in fact, is unbounded. Peter was an ass-kissing, arrogant creep, says Lisa Loving, a Hefner aide-de-camp. He's trash. He's lower than snake shit. Loving and O'Connor remember a Bogdanovich jacuzzi incident. Let's face it, Mary. Loving roars in a moment of levity. The guy took a jacuzzi in his boxer shorts. He'd sit and talk to a girl all night long, Loving continues, then call here the next day to get her number because he didn't have the balls to ask her himself. Dorothy turned him down several times. He's a piece of sleaze. He's the kind of guy who would fuck a girl and never call her again. If Hef goes to bed with a girl one time, he's her friend for life, and she's always welcome in his home. Okay, now they have some quotes for some reason in the middle of this article, but here we go. A very special time for me is the post-midnight period. It's when my dinner is here. I'm still very much rooted in the Midwestern farm cuisine. Hugh Hefner. Why is that quote in here? I don't know. That's okay. We're just going to read them all. What does he eat? He eats 4 things. Pot roast, fried chicken, pot roast, and liver and onions. But he also likes peanut butter and lettuce sandwiches. Ew, peanut butter and lettuce? That's disgusting. Sorry. French fries, potato chips, Franco-American spaghetti. What is that? The kind of bread that sticks to the roof of your mouth. Hershey bars, Snickers bars, chocolate-covered raisins. He likes cornflakes and fried eggs for breakfast. When he's not feeling well, He likes poached eggs, mashed potatoes, and pears, says Mary O'Connor. To what would you attribute the stroke, medically, reporter? The precipitation, stress. Mark Sanganor, that's his personal physician, Hef's personal physician. I had a stroke on the 7th of March. The focus and priorities of my entire life have been changed as a result. I think now that the stress came not just from the hurtful fabrication of the book, but from the uncertainty of knowing how to deal with it. I would think you've got to confront this, and others would say you shouldn't do that. You're just going to sell copies of the book. You're going to make it bigger. Hugh Hefner. It's 2 a.m. on a chilly March 7th in Los Angeles. Hefner is alone in his bedroom-sized pastel green oriental motif bathroom, perusing headlines in the new Los Angeles Times. Quite suddenly, he loses his ability to read, or to even find the words to describe the sensation to carry. There was no pain, no collapse, he recalls later. He retires to his king-size bed, notable for the buxom female nude forms carved into its head and baseboards, the knee-high stacks of video cassettes on either side, and the 2 7-foot screens at its foot. Carrie joins him as she has done every night for 2 years, and Hefner drifts off from his standard Pepsi-induced caffeine high into sleep. When I awoke, there was further deterioration. I couldn't put together even a simple sentence. There was a very mild paralysis, but I wasn't aware of it. It was in the left lobe and affected the right side of my face, so that when I smiled, one side didn't react. Neurologist Clark Espy visits Hefner on that afternoon. The doctor grabs a button on Hefner's pajamas and asks, "What's this?" Hefner cannot find the word. The doctor lifts his own tie and says, "What is this?" Hefner cannot name the object, nor is he able to tell Espy the words for belt, buckle, or pencil. Hefner's tendency to agoraphobia takes an extreme turn. He does not want to go to the hospital. He appeals to his own doctor, Mark Sanganor, a stocky gang list friend in his 40s. The one thing I said to my doctor, because the stroke was stress-related, and the thought of going to the hospital was for me rather stressful, and what I said to my doctor, and here Hefner, recalling his words 5 months later, changes course. One of the things that caused some controversy was a question related to the seriousness of the stroke, because I didn't go to the hospital. But Mark believed me. He took the chance. He saved my life. Sagamore moves into the house of his friend and patient. Hefner lies in the bed watching Frank Capra and Preston Sturges movies and a scratchy Dick Tracy serials, reading anthologies of 30s and comic strips. That's interesting. That's the daughter who said that Hugh Hefner and that doctor were secretly gay lovers their whole life or something. She also says that Hugh Hefner raped Dorothy Stratten, but she says that Dorothy Stratten babysat her. If her dad and her, I assume she didn't move into the mansion before her dad, didn't move until Hefner had the stroke was caused by the writing of the book about Dorothy's murder. How is Dorothy going to be babysitting this girl when she's not even at the house? Dorothy's dead for a year before this girl comes to the house. Suspect, I think. Unless I have my timelines wrong. I totally could have my timelines wrong, you know. Just thought that was interesting. That's an interesting little ditty. Sagamore moves into the house of his friend and patient. Hefner lies in the bed watching Frank Capra and Preston Sturges movies and scratchy Dick Tracy serials and reading anthologies of 30s comic strips. He calls it revisiting my childhood in the most positive way and doing Norman Cousins types of things. He is surrounded by a menagerie of stuffed animals occupying the floor, furniture, and mantelpiece. The room is shrouded by electronically operated taupe velvet drapes that block sunlight. A panel with rheostatic light controls and video and television switches is next to the bed. I'm going to be able to sit in bed, Hefner remembers thinking. I'm not going to be able to do anything. I'm going to have to just sit there. Employees in the Holmby Hills house and the magazine staff in Chicago are told that Hefner has pneumonia. Christy flies to Los Angeles to see her father. Almost 4 weeks later, April Fool's Day, a parade of idling cars and vans stretches from Charing Cross Road past the swiveling TV camera on a pole and the fake boulder with a speaker embedded in it, through the movie star iron gates, up the steep, high-walled drive. Fuel exhaust shimmers in the Los Angeles spring air. A flurry of red-vested parking valets relieve reporters, and camera crews of their vehicles at the circular drive in front of Hefner's house. Playboy Enterprise 60-minute documentary about the life and death of Dorothy Stratten is premiering on twin screens inside the darkened living room. It's standing room only for latecomers. Against the best advice of his closest associates and Christie's heartfelt wishes, Hefner has called a press conference. My editorial director, Arthur Kretschmer, wrote me a 3-page memo. Hefner would confide weeks later. It said, "You can't do this. You cannot tell the press what is really going on. They will not understand the casual connection, the darkness, and then the darkness of what has happened. When it's over, all they will remember is 2 celebrities pissing on each other." Hefner's documentary is dedicated to the proposition that Stratton's years in the Playboy empire were the best of her life. I think that's pretty undeniably true. Sorry, guys. It's true. She was a contemporary Cinderella who made it from behind the Dairy Queen counter in Vancouver to the Playboy Mansion West, onto the pages of the magazine and into movies. Playboy editors and photographers, her acting coach, and Hefner himself gave unctuous testimony to Stratton's beauty and star quality. There is a strip of Stratton. There is a clip of Stratton, ethereal, soft-spoken, on a talk show, and for an intense moment, there's a window on the character Bogdanovich drew in his book, a shy and secure woman whose ideals were at war with her reality. I was very awkward growing up, very skinny and no shape. I was very self-conscious about everything. Well, because I hadn't fully grown, embarrassed laugh, and my lips were much too big for my face, and my hands were really big, and I was skinny, and my legs were long, and everything. And then she added hastily, "The only thing that really worked for me, I guess, was my brain. I was a straight-A student." A sentimental narrative is buttressed with interludes of Stratton, stripped, cavorting within meadows, bubble baths, and on tiger skin rugs, often lapsing into nervous giggles. See, they love to say nervous giggles. I think she was giggling because she was having the time of her goddamn life. She was giggling like she was on a roller coaster. She was giggling with thrills, is how I interpreted that. Of course, we all just have our own interpretations, don't we? Ella Fitzgerald sings, "I'm a little lamb who's lost in the wood." A religious silence descends upon the gathered press. Stratton's grave, followed by the nude Stratton in Playboy pictorial, headlined as "Famous Blondes of the Past." Oh, I have that. I love that one. That was such a beautiful one. "Famous Blondes of the Past," in which she poses as Monroe and others, is the end piece. Sleek and professional, the movie is also a subtle point-by-point refutation of Bogdanovich's book. Fuck that book. When the lights come on, Hefner, in pink Oxford cloth shirt and gray flannel pants, the costume he dons for worldly encounters, stands behind the podium and blinks through his thick aviator-framed bifocals at his guests. He begins to read his statement, his sonorous voice rising and falling as the drama of his words demand. In the next hour, he denies the jacuzzi rape. There is little reaction from the assembled press. Then he drops the bomb, accusing Bogdanovich of seducing Stratton's 13-year-old sister Louise and claiming that she served as a pathological replacement for Dorothy from that time until the present. He introduces Burl Elridge, a gruff, self-conscious diesel mechanic from Vancouver who married Nellie Shop, Stratton's mother, 3 months before Stratton's death. Eldridge says he never witnessed the director and Louise in any acts of sex, but he insists that they often shared a bed. And he adds, I cannot see him sleeping with her if he was not having a sexual relationship with her. When I say sleeping with her, I mean many weekends he just made a habit of coming to Vancouver and taking Louise to the Bayshore Inn. Just like that, just the two of them. Eldridge tells reporters Bogdanovich paid for plastic surgery to reconstruct Louise's jawbone to make her better resemble Dorothy. That Bogdanovich destroyed his marriage with Nell by lavishing expensive gifts on her and possibly even sleeping with her too. One time, Eldridge says he walked into the bedroom of the Hoogstratten's Vancouver house and observed that Louise's night clothes on one side of the bed, Nellie's on the other, and Peter's flight bag at the foot of the bed. I do believe it's quite obvious that he was acting in a sexually perverted manner. When Eldridge finishes, Hefner tells the stunned journalists, it is this that I have known about for more than 6 months and have been unwilling to deal with until 3.5 weeks ago. The stroke gave me permission. In addition to a row of television cameras focused at his face, 3 video cameras manned by Playboy employees film the press conference as if it were a movie, which of course it soon becomes, complete with cutaways and close-ups. That day was the greatest cathartic experience of my entire life, Hefner would say later, and in weeks to come, he watches the resulting video of himself over and over on the movie screens of his bedroom, experiencing the catharsis again and again. Louise Stratten and her mother learned of Hefner's press conference while they were staying with Bogdanovich at his house on the Copa de Ora Drive for Louise's Easter vacation from the 11th grade. 48 hours later, they filed a $5 million slander suit against Hefner and Burl Eldridge. News of Louise's counter press conference to announce the action was carried on all the local television stations. Louise's lawyer, Gloria Allred, kept her arm clenched tightly around the girl's shoulder throughout. Louise spoke in a high, babyish voice, tears flooding her eyeliner-rimmed eyes, frizzy blonde hair framing her face. I just wanted to quit, she said. I've been going through pain and suffering for the past 5 years, and I just don't think we deserve to go through it anymore. She told reporters that Dorothy had left her money for braces, but orthodontists had suggested that she also undergo jaw surgery for medical, not cosmetic reasons. I totally believe that because the shape of her jaw, of Louise's jaw, it looks exactly like my uncle, who had braces and then later had that same surgery that they took his jaw and they actually broke it in half and like reset it, and it had to be wired up and everything for a while. Crazy. But her chin and my uncle's chin, they look very, very similar. So I do believe that she needed to get some plastic surgery as like reconstructive, and it didn't start out as cosmetic, but let us continue. For braces, not cosmetic reasons. Allred took pains to deny Bogdanovich's role in the lawsuit. I became involved because Louise decided that she has been harmed. She wants to do something about it. Also, that's such bullshit. We all know that Peter Bogdanovich was involved in that. We all know the truth. Come on. Like, he's such a creep. He's such a creep, and he hides behind this, oh, I'm such a great guy. It's like, whatever. Days later, over teriyaki in a Japanese restaurant on Wilshire Boulevard, Allred reiterated, Peter's only relationship to Louise and Nell is as a friend of the family. Allred was deeply incensed by Hefner's charges. Even newspapers don't give the names of rape victims. If he was just trying to get back at Bogdanovich, it wouldn't justify this. Louise, she continued, was mortified by the experience. Louise doesn't know why Hefner is doing this to her. She's only met him twice. She's just a high school student. She wants to live in Vancouver and be a secretary. Okay, that is so true, and that is so unfortunate. It's like when the Josh Duggar scandal broke, one of the many Josh Duggar scandals, and it turned out that he'd been molesting his sisters when he was younger. I felt so horrified for those poor girls. I had a similar situation, shall we say, when I was a kid. I had a cousin who was very creepy and very fingery and I spent a lot of time running away from that individual. And to have had something like that come out publicly, how humiliating and embarrassing for the victim of that situation. So I gotta say in here, whatever Hefner's motives were, ooh, I feel it for Louise, absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like no one ever stands up for Louise. Her useless mother does nothing to protect Louise or Dorothy. She does nothing to, just everyone, every adult in Louise's life fails her. Poor Louise, my God. Anyway. Bogdanovich, who declined to be interviewed, issued a press release in response to Hefner's allegations. I am angry and sad that he singled us out to make a pornographic scandal of our characters and our relationship, he said. Hefner acts as if those two women don't exist except to be used to get at me. Well, they do exist. Hefner fell into a second, milder depression when Louise's suit was launched, but he was unrepentant. To him, it was nothing more than a very cute, calculated move on Bogdanovich's part. He hid in the back and put the girl out front and made Hefner versus the little girl, which he thought was a very smart move. No, that's 100% what he did. Of course, the whole thing backfired. For all his warmth and caring, Hefner had a blind spot when it came to Louise Stratten. He did. He was animated by the crisis and had precipitated in Stratton's family and the house on Copa de Oro, not out of a sense of vengeance, but in anticipation that his own virtue would now be heralded. The truth will finally be known, was his reply when reporters tried to focus his attention on the girl's dilemma. Privately, he was more emotional, less measured in his language. Once, his voice booming, he said, "The victim in this story is not some 16-year-old girl. The victim, as it turns out, is the publisher of Playboy magazine." Yeah, huh? Hef? Arrogant much? What an A. Why is the battery dying? You're plugged in. How can your battery be dying when you're plugged in? This is a mystery. It'll work now? Something? Okay. So, Hefner is certainly not an angel, and he can make some dumbass mistakes himself, can't he? Sure can. Over the summer months, Hefner came to his library in the late afternoons to indulge his obsession. To his first meeting, he wore street clothes. 2 successive meetings, he wore his pajamas and a long robe, a choice indicative of trust. Eventually, he dispensed with the robe. Most days, he entered the room in purposeful strides, papers under his arm. He could have been any corporate manager intent on business, except he was wearing scarlet or emerald satin, and the contents of his portfolio had to do with the sexual comportment of a 16-year-old girl or the presumed insanity of an old friend. As the afternoons wore on, he would jump up periodically to pull a fresh bottle of Pepsi from a minibar behind an oak-paneled cabinet, or with equal frequency, to use the black marble-lined bathroom adjacent. Occasionally, in a gesture that would appear to be unconscious, he would tear a tiny scrap from the Kleenex wadded in one hand, roll it between his fingers, and slip it in his mouth. His hands were veinless and smooth like those of a youth. They tended to tremble ever so slightly. He smelled of soap. He clearly prefers not to be touched by casual acquaintances. His girlfriends have almost never been allowed to hang on him. I've noticed that. I have noticed that. Each meeting would begin with an analysis of his standing in the press. He was elated after the airing of the 2020 piece reported by Geraldo Rivera. In his inimitable fashion, Rivera called Bogdanovich's book a smear. His questions to Hefner were fawning. "You deserve the respect of millions and millions of people in changing the lifestyle of the successive generations," Rivera asked an inquiry that failed to make the finished piece. "Do you think that you've ever gotten their respect?" Hefner smiled. "I think we're a little too close to see it yet," he said. He was also pleased by his appearance on the David Letterman show the same week. "It was a good media week for me," he said, full of confidence. Inevitably, a discussion of either the slander suit or Bogdanovich's book would veer into wider regions of sexual psychology. In my youth, sex was associated with depression, sin, disease, ugliness, sensationalism. I grew up in a home in which my parents did not hug or kiss, did not display emotion, he said. Early on, I saw the hurtfulness of those attitudes. And then he would ask rhetorically, fairly hissing the comment, why are we so fucking scared of our own sexuality? I would like to know that the answer to that question too. Am I hissing? This reporter, my God, I do not love this reporter. Oh no, I fucked it up. That's okay, I'll fix it. We're gonna put this over here for now though. His own sexuality seems oddly mired in the 40s. There is something rather delightful and joyous about that romanticized period in which I was raised, he would say. The World War II pinups, the Cole Porter music. I would go to my grave influenced by that romanticism. I understand very easily how pinup pictures seem so symbolic of the trivializing of womankind, but do you want to lose all that glamour and sweetness? I don't think so. Or the trivializing. Emphasizing our beauty and our sweetness and making us glamorous does not mean that we cannot be anything else. Women are human beings, well-rounded creatures who are more than just one particular thing at a time. In August, with very little fanfare, Louise Stratten dropped her lawsuit against Hefner. By most accounts, things had gone poorly in the Stratten camp. Playboy's aggressive chief counsel in Los Angeles, Anthony Glassman, had only taken 2 depositions when Louise's attorney stepped down. A press-savvy feminist lawyer, Allred was uncharacteristically taciturn about her decision to withdraw. Everything is governed by that attorney-client privilege. I cannot comment on why the decision was made. I think that decision was made is because Gloria Allred is in fact a real feminist and she figured out what the fuck was going on with those Strattens, or rather with Bogdanovich. I'm not even as mad at Nellie. I think she was fucked up. Bogdanovich is the bad guy here. Anyway, Hefner supplied his own logic. Allred was in for a big shock because she's a staunch feminist. She had been appearing on television with Bogdanovich thinking she had a woman's rights guy on her hand, and what she had was something else again. Oh my God, I did not read that ahead of time. That's 100% what I thought though too. For the director, Louise's slander suit had leaped the bounds of a feminist struggle and, one suspects, was looming as a nightmarish forum in which his life would be on trial. It's not surprising then that LA criminal lawyer Paul Caruso succeeded Allred. Cunning, feisty, Caruso had gained notoriety for his defense in a number of sensational crime cases. More significant, Bogdanovich had retained Caruso several months earlier when he learned that the LAPD Juvenile Division was reopening an investigation into his relationship with Louise Stratten. Louise Stratten. Later on she changes her name to Stratten, just like her big sister. She does a lot of things to appear a lot more like her big sister as she gets older. I wonder if that had anything to do with the influence of a certain person who's hanging around. The initial investigation began in 1981, was instigated by an LA cop working as a part-time security guard for Bogdanovich that year. So it was before Hefner even said anything. They had opened an investigation into him. I didn't know that. I did not know that. Last spring, it was part-time security guard for Bogdanovich that year. After several months, the investigation was closed and Bogdanovich was never charged. Last spring, the LAPD was unable once again to find evidence to support the claims against Bogdanovich. Sex crimes are like that, aren't they? According to Hefner, the shakeup in Louise's defense came as a result of Glassman's depositions. One was given by William Jordan, a former LA cop who had been in charge of a small security team employed by Bogdanovich. Jordan accompanied the director to Italy and France with Louise and her mother in 1981. He quit, Hefner says, citing Jordan's deposition because he was disgusted by what he witnessed. Bogdanovich and Louise cohabitating in the same hotel suite. In fact, Jordan claimed in his deposition that he was dismissed when one of his subordinates fell asleep on the job. Glassman also deposed Darcy Hoog Stratten, the estranged wife of Stratton's younger brother John. In her deposition, she recalls what is surely a very close relationship between Bogdanovich and Louise, but Darcy too failed to actually see them, not making love. If she saw them in a physical, compromising situation when the girl is 13, that is called rape. Rape. Say the word. Not making love, not underage sex. Okay, stop it. The fuck? You are fired. You reporter, writer, person of this article. Ugh. Shortly before Labor Day, 7 people converged on Tony Glassman's Beverly Hills offices to arrange a face-saving settlement for both sides. Anthony Pellicano, a private investigator with expertise in bugging and debugging, presided. His connection with Playboy Enterprises is long-standing. He boasts that Hefner's organization gave him a Patek Philippe watch for helping Playboy writer investigate a story. Immediately after Hefner's press conference, Bogdanovich hired Pellicano to do a sweep of his Copa de Oro house to determine if he was being spied upon, presumably by Playboy. There came a point when he absolutely trusted me, Pellicano said. I listened to him. The hurt was coming through loud and clear. I decided this feud was a fruitless endeavor. The investigator made his first call to Rosenwig, whom he knew from the Chicago days. Talks progressed over a period of several weeks. Ultimately, Glassman and Caruso together worded a series of releases to be signed by Hefner, Eldridge, Bogdanovich, Nell Shop, and Louise Hoog Stratten, each of them promising that they would never file suit in these issues again. Hefner savored what he felt was his victory. I'm not interested in crucifying Bogdanovich. I'm not interested in sending a guy to prison. You're not? You know the guy's having sex with a 13-year-old and you're not interested in sending him to prison? I'd be interested in that. Oh my God. He said one day in the library, I have no problem with accepting the fact that it came from a combination of his guilt and craziness in combination with being lied to and misled by other people. But I don't have any problem with that. I'll be damned if I'm gonna pretend in talking to people that the last year and a half didn't exist. It was little matter to him that the paperback edition of Unicorn would soon be released. I knew they would never pursue this suit. The depositions have left Bogdanovich totally exposed, he said. Just as Bogdanovich had portrayed Stratten and his family and her family as Hefner's victims, Hefner seemed unable to view the mother and daughter of his murdered playmate as anything more than Bogdanovich's pawns. The supposed reason for dismissing the case was that the pressure was too much on Louise, he said. Well, the pressure has been related to Bogdanovich. Caruso, not unexpectedly, painted a different picture. Hefner just outfinanced the girl, he said, adding, Louise was strictly on the defensive from the first. She should have taken the offense to win. By delving more deeply into Hefner's own past, I would have deposed Hefner for 5 or 6 days, 6 hours a day. Why? That doesn't have anything to do with the suit that they were pursuing at the time, which was slander against Louise. Dumb. Idiot. For Louise and her mother, however, the grim realization that the suit would take at least 5 years to come to trial, that their lives would be overwhelmed by it, was all that mattered. We never understood what a burden it would be caused by filing and prosecuting a lawsuit. For Louise's health and sanity, therefore, I simply want pleas for all of this to be ended, Nell Shop said in the press release issued along with Bogdanovich's. Winning is not even worth one more day of the pain and suffering involved. Yeah, did you know that's how half of Dorothy's estate, all the money from Playboy and all that stuff, half of that went to the family of her murderer because he was her husband at the time that it happened. And that was Nell's answer to that too, was just, we're so sad, we just don't want to fight, let them have it. She's the most useless creature I have heard of in my life. I do not like her very much at all. Also, where is she when this guy is taking her 13-year-old daughter into private hotel rooms with him? Oh my God. Okay, where are we? Bogdanovich, in his release, apologized. I am sorry if Mr. Hefner's health has suffered because of the things I have said or written. He and I were once friends, and I regret any pain Mr. Hefner and Dorothy Stratten's family have suffered as a result of past disagreements between him and me. It appeared Bogdanovich had undergone his share of suffering, though more quietly than his antagonist. Hefner says, did he though? Hefner says he learned on a tip from a Playboy photographer that Bogdanovich, using a pseudonym, had entered Los Angeles Cedars-Sinai Hospital on July 4th complaining of chest pains. A close friend of Bogdanovich's denies the incident. There were rumors, too, that the director was about to file for bankruptcy. 4 months later, Bogdanovich did just that in Los Angeles. According to news accounts, his failed attempt to release They All Laughed as a tribute to Stratten had devastated him financially. That's true. That is very sad how that all happened. In December, the Los Angeles Times reported Bogdanovich was left with $21.37 in his bank and $25 in his pocket. His debts incurred as a result of trying to market and distribute the film totaled more than $6.6 million against his assets of $1.5 million. Jeez. Playboy, by comparison, had accrued legal expenses in the six figures, starting with its attempt to challenge Bogdanovich's manuscript, was unscathed. Companies have to draw a line in terms of what they're going to allow an individual to get away with. All this was well beyond that line, Rosenwig explained. Most of our costs were picked up by our insurance company. You understand, the attack was on the corporation, not just the individual. True, the attack was on the heart of the company, Hefner and Playmates. Stepping inside, well, I don't know if that was quite true, but all right. Stepping inside Hefner's world, which is largely confined to the 5 acres in Holmby Hills, you sense the way of life he seeks to defend is less sexually liberated and glamorous than frayed at the edges. That's not really the vibe I ever got, but okay, sure. But Hefner's vision is rose-colored. Contrary to what Peter suggests, this house was quite literally a sanctuary for Dorothy, he says. It was a way of escaping from her husband and the rest of the hassling that goes on out there. This place has been referred to as a Shangri-La, and it is. You get hassled out there. You don't get hassled in here. Tonight, Labor Day Sunday, a typical gathering of middle-aged men and very young women cluster in groups, mostly of their own sex, inside his Gothic house. The standard ratio at Hefner's house is 3 women to every man. I would have thought it was more. A fleet of youthful butlers keeps glasses filled and ashtrays emptied. The mansion regulars are gathered, actors with familiar faces whose names nonetheless hover just below recall, producers who aren't producing, athletes for whom the mansion connotes class, teenagers on the cusp of womanhood in search of film careers or unknown thrills, or with nothing better to do. Among the men are actors Robert Culp and Chuck McCann, former footballer Jim Brown, who recently beat a rape rap, former LA Deputy District Attorney Vincent Blugosi, Charles Manson's prosecutor, director Richard Brooks, and octogenarian Max Lerner. The nomic journalist and house intellectual Lerner stays in his guest bedroom when he's in Los Angeles and indulges in Playboy speak, as in, I had breakfast with Dorothy Stratten the morning that she made Playmate of the Year. This is not Hollywood's A crowd. Nothing's changed around here in years, says a big man named Jane Shakov, something. Sorry. Who's wearing matching white parachute silk jacket and pants. Shakov is standing next to a tiny 1954 dolly. Young version auto-sodomized by her own chastity. That sounds like a lovely picture. Dolly. Nearby, at the top of the double stairs leading to Hefner's bedroom, a pumpkin-sized broad sculpture rests on a pedestal, Close examination reveals it to be, unmistakably, an upturned, disembodied vulva. Mansion staffers who call it the brass ass. That's amazing. Leave notes for one another in the opening. Down the hall a few feet is a large glass case filled with small figurines of a man and a woman in every imaginable posture of sexual intercourse. A Midwestern University art professor sculpted the collection. That sounds like the, what's that called? That book, the sexy book, where everyone does all the different like positions and stuff. The Kama Sutra. The Kama Sutra. Shakov was the inspiration for Warren Beatty's shampoo character, the Beverly Hills hair cutter who loved women. Now Shakov cuts Hefner's hair. Well, one thing's changed, he said after a minute. In the old days, when you'd ask for a cigarette, they'd bring you a pack. Now you're lucky if you get one. Don't smoke cigarettes. Women are invited to these twice weekly events and buffet dinners and movie showings because they are bunnies or in Playboy clubs or friends of bunnies or the reigning Playmate of the Month. Often they are invited on the basis of a nude Polaroid they sent to Playboy Studios on Sunset Boulevard in hoping of being chosen for a Playmate tryout. Or they are being culled from the stacks of Polaroids of women who are photographed naked every Thursday morning in these studios in what amounts to an open casting call. Those sessions are the real business of Playboy, the gritty essence of Hefner's empire. His people build the free-for-all weekly events as a kind of community service, a courtesy towards what they say is a multitude of 500 Playmate hopefuls a year. Miss Chiquita Banana stands by the bar in a borrowed, backless red leather dress, a bit wobbly in her heels. Isn't that what Holly called Bridget the first time she saw her like going around at the mansion? She said she looked like Miss Chiquita Banana. She's 18 and under the makeup, she's a bit wobbly in her heels. She's 18 and under the makeup a kid. I've heard a lot of movie producers hang out here, she whispers, her eyes casting over the crowd. Two young women are strolling on a path outside. One carries a flash hammock camera. She's in her own Disneyland. Masculine gazes follow them as they pass. Conversations falter until they are out of sight. I don't know why you keep calling them women. One male snaps unexpectedly. He never has women up here, they're girls. I'm not talking about age. They've never even been anywhere. Not even to a good restaurant. They wouldn't know an endive from an iceberg. It was in the library 2 years ago that Hefner first noticed Carrie, a 20-something-year-old from Vancouver who was staying at his house while she tried out for a Playboy cover photo session. I remember the evening quite well, Hefner begins. He is standing in his bedroom holding a picture of Carrie taken by Hollywood photographer Hurrell. The sophisticated creature in the photograph is hardly recognized as Carrie. I was playing Monopoly. It was one of those things where you look across the room and something happens. Just 2 weeks earlier, my relationship with Playmate Shannon Tweed had ended. And I was determined not to get involved again. But the mutual attraction was very obvious. We fell for each other. I totally love Shannon Tweed too. She's one of my faves. Hefner acknowledges what he calls the thematic coincidence of Carrie and Dorothy both being from Vancouver. Oh, I didn't even put that together. Wow. And each staying in his house while her photography sessions were on. But he asserts the real thematic coincidence is with Barbie Benton. Both women decided to halt the march towards Playmate when they became lovers with Hefner. Both wanted something more than $15,000, a 5-year paid subscription to Playboy, and a platinum-headed rabbit pin. The tangible benefits accrued by Playmates. Carrie, says photo editor Grabowski, who invited the Canadian to LA to test for the magazine, presents a challenge to Hef of his ever really knowing her. The girls he's had in the past hadn't really had all these dimensions. She can be any woman she wants, and she wants it all. I also think, Grabowski adds, that the fact that she is so bright presents a problem. Carrie Lee can look elegant, but she prefers to cultivate a distinctly trashy look. This person is so nice. This article, this writer is so nice. Oh my gosh. Okay, let's see. distinctly trashy look. She's a clothes junkie who favors Los Angeles boutique called, appropriately, Addictions. Hefner gives her a clothes allowance that she routinely exceeds. On some morning, she wanders the grounds in her bathrobe with a deathly white clay mask on her face. Other females on the premises gaze in astonishment. So what if none of Hef's other girlfriends ever did that? Carrie says on the night she's interviewed in the zoo park beyond. This is my home. I wouldn't be living here if I had to worry about it. She's determined not to be mistaken for another LA Bim, an ingenue who thinks her best shot at superstardom involves taking off her clothes. I've been a model since I was 14, she said. I came here to do cover tests. I never thought really of being a playmate. It wasn't like I was from a small town in Ohio and didn't know what was happening. When Hefner called her in Vancouver to tell her he was in love with her and wanted her to return and live with him, she remembers thinking, it won't last. But it has lasted, she says, and she shrugs and says coolly, I want it out of my life the way that it was, and Hef came along. She's not worried about Hefner's antipathy towards marriage. How long do most marriages last? When he went with Barbie, that was 9 years. Shannon, that was 3 years. Nothing lasts forever, but his relationships last as long as anyone else's. Carrie wants to experience more of the world outside Holmby Hills, and she wants more out of her life than just being Hef's girlfriend. He's captured most of his dreams. I haven't. I say, listen, Hef, remember when you were 22? It's not that you're not enough for me. You are. I just have to expand my mind. And I know sometimes that's hard for him to understand. The company was growing like crazy in the 60s, but the business side never really meant anything to me. People tend to put me down for that, but if people want to believe that business is that important, good luck to them. It's not what I'm all about. That's just another random Hugh Hefner quote that they have in the middle of this article for no reason, apparently. Hefner is bathed in television lights. His three-piece suit seems blindingly white. Carrie looks like a peacock crossed with a mermaid. A tall headdress of jewels and feathers sits on her head. Her floor-length dress clings like saran wrap. They are surrounded by reporters in a private corner of the New Manhattan Playboy Club. The original one closed 2 years ago due to declining revenues and membership. This night, opening night, is a show of corporate optimism and determination to keep up with the times. Young men in tight pants and suspenders, white collars and cuffs, their hairy chests exposed, serve drinks along with young women in the same tight waist-cinching costume that Gloria Steinem griped about 23 years ago. Over the bar, a pair of Hefner's satin pajamas hang framed behind the glass like the preserved garments of a sacred conqueror. Oh my god. The designer lost the battle to drop the name Playboy from the club. He gained one concession. The rabbit head logo is played down. Al Goldstein is there. George Plimpton is there. Christie is there. I think I saw Harrison Ford. One guest said, it might have been someone in a Harrison Ford mask, is the glum response. Hefner has never liked New York. I don't like New York either. And hasn't been there in 8 years. Rosenwig, Hefner said weeks earlier, just got back from New York. He says it's pure Fellini. Nevertheless, Hefner bravely chartered a jet and brought along Dr. Saganor, Lisa Loving, and others to christen the new club. Now he is ready to join his party. He moves slowly out into the cavernous space with Carrie Lee on his arm, taking mincing Japanese-style steps in her narrow dress. Fascinating. Okay, so who wrote that? Clearly someone who hates Playboy and hates sexy women quite a lot and thinks any sexy woman is probably a dumb bimbo. They always tend to be Hillary Johnson by Hillary Johnson. Okay, we'll look her up and see what other bullshit feminazi articles she's come out with. Okay, that is it for this one, friends and neighbors. That was the awesome, what's it called? Blows Against an Empire. We'll do part 1 and part 2 when I put them up on, not Facebook, YouTube. And we are gonna next continue this story. This one was in 1986. This is 1989. And you thought we were done talking about Louise and Peter and Dorothy Stratten? Well, we are not done talking. So join me next time and we will read that article. Thanks very much, friends and neighbors. Catch you on the flip side.